Okay, so the Bad Batch Season 2 is now at the halfway point, and we have a double bill episode that's definitely my favourite storyline that we've had in both seasons so far. This to me is the level of a political thriller, filled with twists, turns and big reveals that speaks to the landscape that now exists in the galaxy. There's so much good stuff to talk about, and throughout this video we're going to be going through both episodes 7 and 8 scene by scene. This video includes Easter eggs, hidden details, and everything you need to know about the entries. If you enjoy it, please hit the thumbs up button and don't forget to subscribe for videos like this every day. Out of the way, thank you for clicking this. Now let's get into the Bad Batch Season 2. Now the main reason I think this was a two-parter was because the first episode doesn't contain the Bad Batch at all. It's also of course the mid-season, and with that comes several revelations and turns for the story. I think that they didn't want to lose the focus of the show too much and instead want us to give us a double bill centered around the same tale to keep us invested for the next half. Either way, both really knock it out of the park, and we get some big appearances by Bail Organa, Captain Rex and Emperor Palpatine. Voiced by Ian McDiarmid, we see as the clones are pushed one step closer to oblivion, with Palps ushering a new era with the Imperial Stormtrooper. All Palpatine needed was approval from the Senate for it, and he used Rampart as a patsy to carry this out. Now the first episode is called The Clone Conspiracy, with the latter being titled Truth and Consequences. The first could be dealing with a number of aspects, such as the conspiracy around the clones to replace them, but also because the clones suspect that something else is going on. We pick up on Coruscant outside a bar, and this looks similar to the one from the start of Attack of the Clones. The episode follows a similar sort of motif, with a sniper killing someone outside, just like what happened with Jango Fett's assassin Wessel. At the front of it we can catch a Twi'lek, and inside an 8D droid serving up drinks to the clone troopers. Here we join two who help bombard Tipoca City, and since then Rampart's covered up the attack with lies and deception. He said that Storm's at the location, and we know from visiting the planet that it was Rampart with these. Now the waves go sky high, and apparently the platforms were flooded with rain, and this idea is what's used to cover up what really happened. However, jet fuel doesn't melt steel beams, and those platforms were built to withstand the waves, so that's a f***ing lie. Now for those involved in it, it hasn't sat well either. If you've been following our breakdowns, and you'll know how we've talked about one of the major themes in this season being that of independence. The Batch themselves of course represent this. There was Wilco in episode 2, Commander Cody, and even some of the enemy separatists have now started to seem like the good guys because they don't want to join the Imperials. Now we learn one of the soldiers is called Slip, and he just wants to slip under the radar whilst his mate has stupidly messaged Rampart giving him an ultimatum. He said he could come clean himself or that he would do it, but you dumb son of a bitch, that you've just given the guy a heads up. Now Slip is a nickname that's appeared in the saga so far. There was a First Order Stormtrooper who served under Captain Phasma with the nickname, but the two are unconnected, and it is a pretty common nickname to be fair. Now Slip says that the attack on Tipoca City was just following orders, and this is a catchphrase that's of course popped up throughout the Star Wars canon.
We were following orders, oh were we? Good soldiers follow orders. Good soldiers follow orders. Good soldiers follow orders. Good soldiers follow orders.
Rampart even says something similar at the end of episode 8, and he was very much used as a pawn, much like how the clones were.
Stay back. I was following orders.
Now outside the assassin strikes, but Slip manages to slip away. So I'll stop, mate. I'll stop. Slip manages to slip away, and we get him riding off into the traffic again, riffing on this scene from Attack of the Clones. The assassin is later revealed to be a clone himself, and this is very much a Gemini Man situation, where they have ones that are built purely for Black Ops. He follows orders without question, and to me very much represents the possible person that Crosshair could end up becoming. At the cost of his friends and family, he's given up his freedom to bring what he sees as order to the galaxy, and even Rampart looks down on him. He spent months and months on Camino, and it was only by chance that passers-by came and got him. It is possible that these were sent by Rampart to help build the cover story, and he stayed loyal to the Empire even after being part of the destruction. He saw firsthand what they were willing to do to him and his people, and he's not an Imperial, he's a Simp-Perial. So, swell, stop. You can't help yourself sometimes. I'm actually interested to see what happens with Crosshair now though, as taking Rampart out massively shuffles the deck. Anyway, we then cut to the Senate. Whereas in the past this has been shown on its own, we get a bit of symbolism here with the Star Destroyers in the sky. After the occupation of Desix, we saw one over it, and this is echoed in the scene in Rogue One that happens on Jeddah. It signals who's really in charge here, and we know from this vantage point that they are in control. In the past, it's from this position that they've rained down fire and destroyed entire locations, and though they probably wouldn't do that in the Senate, it's ominous for a reason. Inside we see an Ishitib who says that due to the destruction of Camino that the Galactic Empire is now vulnerable. This allows the stormtroopers to be suggested later on, and it shows how in control of everything that Palpatine is. Rampart wants to push his recruitment bill, which will mean more citizens are forced to serve, and this will save the Imperials money as they no longer have to make clones. We see a Gotham senator who mentions the banking clan, and they were brought up by the clones in episode 3. There's also Senator Pamlo, who has appeared before on live action during Rogue One. And lastly, we have Bail Organa, who needs no introduction, and they'll fill them more. It doesn't really sound that much like Jimmy Schmidt. It's good to see the character back. He brings up the Emergency Powers Act, and this is something that appeared in Revenge of the Sith so that Palpatine could gain control. This shifted the Republic into a military organization that made it a far cry from what it used to be. Bail wants to hear from the Emperor himself, but sitting in his place is Maz Amedda, who you'll likely recognize as being the Emperor's right-hand alien. Debuting in Phantom Menace, he's watched Palpatine gain power over the decades, and has benefited from his manipulative tactics. Lastly, we see Senator Chuchi, who becomes a big part of the 2 episodes. Chuchi first appeared in the Clone Wars episode Trespass, and she's popped up in 16 of them altogether. The Pantoran politician helped the Jedi throughout, and no doubt seeing them wiped out really struck a nerve with her. She's here to say clone lives matter, and there could be clear comments to how soldiers are cast to the side after the wars are over. Rambo practically built an entire franchise around this idea, and those that came back from Vietnam were called baby killers and looked down upon even though they gave up so much when fighting overseas. They just cast to the side, and the Senate wants to focus on the new army instead of caring for the older one. Rampart says there are things in place whilst the clones are phased out, but we saw an Obi-Wan that was a homeless one, which kinda tells you all you need to know. The vote is tabled, and Maz warns Rampart that if anyone finds out what happened on Camino, that it's curtains for him. In classic Palpatine right-hand man style, Amedda's warning comes with him saying,
For your sake, Admiral, be certain there are no more surprises.
Which is riffing on when Darth Vader said it in Return of the Jedi.
I hope so, Commander, for your sake.
Back at the bar, we see Chuchi trying to pitch the pension plans to the clones, but they want to keep fighting. They were born and bred for one thing, and having that taken away from them has left them with nothing else to really live for. One of them says,
I'd rather be out there fighting those insurgent groups that keep popping up.
Who this is, we don't know, but it's possible that it might be either Saw Gerrera or possibly Luthen's early rebellion. The Empire completely overlooked these, and ultimately it led to their downfall when they could have had soldiers out there stamping them down. Rampart also later talks to Chuchi about the growing rebellion, and I like how this is seeded throughout the entire episode. Now eventually they learn to trust Chuchi and want to receive her help. Slip decides to go to her, and I love how sketchy he is in the doorway. This is the area his friend got shot and killed at, and he's clearly scared about stepping out. He tells her about the garrison and the conspiracy to cover it up by killing and reassigning those that would speak up. Slip slips through the street, and we see a Rodian before he sends out a distress call to Captain Rex. Rampart says that he will agree to the terms, and states that he was on a training exercise off-world, which is why he couldn't help out. Training exercises at this point are a bit of a running joke in movies and TV shows. The military was dropping it as far back as Iron Man to cover up what was actually going on. Now at this point, Chuchi goes into the underworld, and she's greeted by R2-C4. C4 pops up later in the saga, and he's eventually saved by Poe Dameron in an offshoot story, which is when he joins the Resistance. Led to Bail Organa, the pair want to get Slip to testify, and this will finally reveal the truth to the Senate. Rampart instructs the assassin to handle Slip and the Senator, which is when he makes his move whilst the two meet. Slip wants help from Rex to escape, and as we all know, he managed to avoid the reach of the Empire after the end of the Clone Wars. Now the assassin takes out Slip after he tells Chuchi where the information is, and Rex arrives in the nick of time so he can save the day. Revealed to be a clone, he bites down on the Star Wars version of a cyanide pill and ends his life before he's made to talk further. Again, it's very similar to Gemini Man, in which there's been an extra layer of covert cloning going on so that special troopers can be created to be assigned to secretive jobs. Anyway, that takes us in episode 8, which, as we said, is titled Truth and Consequences. Beginning on Old Mantell, we see Omega trying to meditate like a Jedi. Ever since season 1, there's been these theories that Omega is force sensitive and that this is the reason why she was created in the first place. I did think for a long time that she was made in order to make the building blocks for Palpatine returning somehow, but she doesn't really seem to have the abilities that the Jedi do. Gungi taught her how to meditate, but it doesn't help. However, this might change as the season goes on. We see Gonki the Gonk droid, and Echo also mentions Skako Minor. This is a reference to Clone Wars Season 7 Episode 2 when he was saved by Captain Rex. He was used as a pawn by the Separatists, and though he says he joined the batch because that's where he fit in, we see how this changes come the end. Now they're waiting around for Sid, and we still don't know exactly what's going on with her. There were some clues that something was off, but we'll see how that develops later down the line. Rex sends out a call for help, and they end up going to the heart of the Empire, which is where things will be at their most dangerous. Coruscant is breathtaking, and through Omega's eyes, we see the wonder of the city. After meeting with Rex and Chuchi, they're shown the assassin, who has had all of his identifying numbers completely removed. The batch are of course on Taboka City when it was destroyed, and thus this mission becomes very personal for the group. With the only record being on Ramparts Venator, they end up heading out there, whilst Chuchi gives Omega a tour of the Senate. She says that clones don't have representation in there, even though the laws of it affect them directly. I might be wrong on this, so correct me if I am, but I'm pretty sure that Puerto Rico doesn't have representation in Congress, even though it's part of the US. Also, I don't know why I said Puerto Rico there, trying to sound cool, but clearly didn't work. Now that might be me making connections that aren't there, but I thought I'd just bring it up, and if I'm right, then I'm right, and yes, I'd hit it on the head. But if I'm wrong, forget this part of the video. The Chuchi is basically a character that stands up to the Senate's bureaucracy, which is similar to how Padme did it during the prequel trilogy. Omega recommends speaking to Halle Bertoni, and this is the senator of the planet Camino. She first appeared in the Clone Wars during the Duchess of Mandalore entry, and we learn that she's been outcast since the attack. He recommends following the money, and shoutouts to our editor Matt for pointing out that this could be a reference to all the President's men.
Just follow the money.
Now in an apartment similar to the one that Padme had in Attack of the Clones, she gets Bertoni to speak to her after Omega tells her the truth of what happened on Camino. Bertoni has watched her species fade into obscurity, and in Season 1 we saw Cad Bane take Omega to a rundown cloning facility that had too faded out. Turns out Rampart did divert the funds away from the clone facilities, and they need Bertoni to testify this in the Senate. Near Ramparts Venator, we watch as the batch make a break for the plans and see clone troopers using massifs similar to Tusken Raiders. Their Star Wars answer to dogs, and they use to sniff out anyone that could be sneaking through the area. I also think there's a lot of droids, and Rex mentions Wrecker hating heights, which was first brought up in the Distant Echoes episode in which he was saved. After hanging off the transport, they get on board, and there are moments that pull directly from the rest of the saga. Doors slide open on the ship, and we see how blasting the door panel can indeed lock it, or unlock it, depending what you need at the time. It'll do either one. Now, the batch once more use stun blasts so that they don't harm their brothers, and, well, to keep things PG-13. We see V-Wings mounting up, and these are the ships that Omega was studying back in episode 1 of the season. Using the guns on board the Venator, they shoot down some, and Echo fires up the engines to make sure the troopers evacuate the area. They then launch several escape pods, and the batch manage to make it off the ship the fast way. Back in the Senate, Rampart's pretty much put on trial, and Omega races to them with evidence of his operations. This shows his attack at the end of Season 1 from a new angle, and it's there in black and white, well, blue and white, but moving on. Palpatine rises from the ground at this point, and this is done in a similar way to the shot and revenge of the Sith. This is the first time we've seen the character in the Bad Batch since his hologram in Episode 1, and I have to admit it was chilling watching him arrive. I don't know why, but you never really expect to see the big names in the show, and it was like when Nick Fury popped up in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Anyway, he's arrested by some shock troopers, which we can see from their red and white uniforms. They were basically the police on Coruscant, and they were the gods of the planet hired as galactic peacekeepers. Also, I think it's important to point out that the whole following orders thing is what the Nazis said during the Nuremberg trials when they were asked why they committed such heinous acts. Like the prequel trilogy, Palpatine's managed to play both sides, and the fact that the clones followed Rampart so blindly is what he thinks most worrying. However, he had this installed on them so that they could carry out Order 66 without question, and in one foul swoop he puts things in place to get rid of them. He makes it seem like a kindness whilst ushering in this new legislation, and there will be stormtroopers from this point on. It completely nullifies the clones, and a big question you might have is why would Palpatine do this? Well, as we've been discussing, the clones are slowly starting to think for themselves, and it might be better to just wipe the slate clean. They're asking why they've killed the Jedi, and this seed of doubt could fester into something more. Now in a sad goodbye, we watch as Echo decides to rejoin Rex and help the clones. Later in the timeline, we know that Rex pops up in Rebels along with Wolf and Gregor, and though Echo isn't with them, he does say to Omega that he'll be back at some point. So this goodbye, it may not last forever, but it does feel a bit devastating seeing him go off. Now we end with Omega hugging her Tuca doll, and it's such a somber way to close out these episodes. I don't know why, but knowing what we know makes this feel like a big loss, and though the group managed to get rid of Rampart, it doesn't feel like a win. With hindsight, we know what's coming for the clones and just how tough it's going to be for them to exist in the galaxy. They had it bad, but things are about to get a lot worse, and they're being pushed out even more than before. Having Palpatine usher in the Stormtroopers felt like a big blow, and even though we knew it was coming, I can't help but feel it's tragic. Anyway, that ends the episode, and as you probably can guess, though I'm sighing a lot, I really enjoyed it. Obviously, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it too, so make sure you comment below and let me know. We are in competition right now, giving away Wakanda Forever to 3 subscribers on the 15th of February, and all you have to do to be on the chance of winning is like the video, make sure you subscribe and notifications on, drop a comment below with your thoughts on the episodes. We pick the comments at random at the end of the month, and the winners of the last one are on screen right now, so if that's you, then message me on Twitter at Heavy Spoilers. If you want something else to watch, then make sure you check out our breakdown of The Last of Us, which will be linked on screen right now. Lots of things to talk about, lots of cool Easter eggs, things going on, so definitely head over there right after this. By the way, thanks for sitting through the video. I've been Paul, see you next time. Take care, peace.